So perhaps you're open to the idea of electrification, but you don't want it to look like a jelly bean. Well, the vehicle standing behind me is BMW's answer to that. It's called the i4, and it looks almost identical to the gas-powered version of the 4 Series. In today's video, I'll tell you everything you need to know about the BMW i4 and why you should definitely consider it if you are looking for a luxurious electric sports sedan. So the vehicle standing in front of me is the 2024 BMW i4 in the M50 trim. It was released back in 2021 as a 2022 model year, and I actually reviewed a BMW i4 about 2 years ago and walked away extremely impressed with the vehicle. This 2024 model year has seen some small changes over the years, but the big refresh is for the 2025 model year, where they've kind of facelifted the front end and some of the interior, but for the most part, the powertrain itself has remained mostly unchanged. Now, the reason this vehicle looks just like a 4 Series is because this is not a ground-up EV. In fact, they use the 3 Series and 4 Series chassis and platform to essentially pack some batteries, some electric motors, and they turned it into an electric vehicle. And this is a formula that BMW has been using over the last few years, and I think it's actually pretty successful. I mean, if you take a look at the competition, including Mercedes-Benz, they have built ground-up EVs, which are generally more expensive, and their looks aren't as appealing to customers. They're not selling as many EQSs and EQEs that they had expected because I think a lot of people are questioning the exterior styling of Mercedes products. Whereas here you have an electric BMW that looks nothing like any other electric vehicle on the road today. It does not look like a jelly bean. It has the same aggressive exterior styling, which we'll touch on here in just a minute, as compared to its gas counterpart. Now, as you can see, this one in particular is the M50. It's the top of the line trim level, and it's essentially the electric version of the BMW M4. And let's kick things off talking about exterior styling. Now, starting off with the exterior styling, in case you're wondering what this color is, it's called violet blue, and it's a kind of expensive $4,500 option for the i4, but it looks really cool. It's kind of like a baby blue, and it's a gloss pink color, so there's no metallic speck or anything like that. But what I like is it matches these LED headlights and daytime running lights. Now, my particular vehicle has these $1,000 laser lights, and you can tell they're laser because of that blue trim in there. Now, unfortunately, laser lights are not allowed here in the United States, so they don't really serve a function for the US market. However, in the European market, these are about 10 times brighter than traditional LEDs. And the one advantage here is you can actively adjust certain sections of the headlight beam. So if there's oncoming traffic, it can dim the section where there's other cars, but keep it bright where there's no other cars, so your visibility is greater. So it's a really interesting technology, but unfortunately, US market just doesn't allow it. Now down here, you kind of have some piano black plastic, and the particular vehicle I'm testing today comes with the $2,800 M carbon exterior package. So as you can see, this little air inlet, that's the side curtain vent that goes around the side of the wheels, that is outlined in carbon fiber as well. And then coming to the center, this is traditional BMW 4 Series. You have this large nostril grille up front. Now, obviously, since this is an electric vehicle, your air inlets are not really necessary. You have a little bit of air inlets down here at the bottom, but this section is actually just this gloss black plastic, but from a distance, you can't really tell. Now, some people don't find this to be a very attractive looking front end. Personally, I like it. I think it looks pretty muscular, especially on some of the BMWs where it outlines this grille in some LED lights, but looks are subjective, so it's totally up to you on deciding whether you like that front end or not, but it's almost identical to the gas-powered version of the 4 Series. I do like that big blue BMW logo with the 2 nostrils being kind of outlined in these aggressive lines. Now, coming across the side of the vehicle, again, traditional 4 Series-like styling. It's more of a coupe-like sedan as opposed to the 3 Series, which is more of a traditional sedan, but if you want the electric version, you have to stick to this coupe-like exterior. And talking about the M carbon package, as you'll notice, the side mirror caps are also outlined in carbon fiber. Now, the door handles are flush with the door itself. You kind of have to lift it up, kind of like the traditional door handles of like the 90s. And then one more thing to mention is every single i4 comes with exterior night lighting on the side of the car. So I'm going to try to throw up some footage of what it looks like at night, but it's these cool stripes that almost make it look like the car is moving even when it's standing still. I really like that exterior lighting touch. Now, jumping over to the wheels, they look really nice, and these are optional 20-inch wheels that come part of the $2,500 high-performance tire package. So the standard wheels on the i4 M50 are 19 inches, but this one has the upgraded ones, and they look really nice and add a little bit of width. So these tires are Pirelli P0s, and they're 255 millimeter up front and 285 millimeter in the back. So it's definitely going to get you a little bit more grip, especially considering the performance of this M50. M50. Now, despite these looking good, the one downside about these larger diameter wheels is it does cut your range by about 40 miles, and we'll touch on that when we get to the powertrain. Now, since this is technically an M car, as you'll notice here, there is M badging on the red brake calipers, but also every single i4 M50 gets adaptive suspension on all four wheels. So depending on what drive mode you're in, it will actively adjust all the suspension to make it a little bit softer or a little bit stiffer depending on road conditions. In terms of overall length here, you're looking about 188.5 inches long, so about your typical sports sedan sizing. Now, coming across the rear end of the i4, you do have LED tail lamps, and they have this kind of running light when the lights are activated. You got your i4 badging, and then you've got the M50 badging on the right-hand side. Now, again, this one being the carbon fiber package, you have this cool-looking carbon fiber spoiler, and then down in your bumper area, you have more carbon fiber in this section with your side marker lights. And then the one way you can tell this is the electric version is there's no exhaust ports, of course, but from the exterior, aside from that i4 badging and the lack of exhaust ports, you really can't tell that this is an electric vehicle. So as of 2025, there are 3 different trim levels for the i4. There's the i4 eDrive 40, which is the entry-level one in rear-wheel drive. There's the i4 xDrive 40, which is essentially the same battery and powertrain components, except you have an all-wheel drive dual motor setup with a little bit more horsepower. And then the range-topping M50, which is the vehicle standing behind me. Now, prior to the 2025 facelift, they also had the eDrive 35, which was the entry-level version of the i4. However, for 2025, they've eliminated that trim level, so the eDrive 40 is your entry-level trim. Surprise, surprise, under the hood of the BMW i4 is not a front trunk or storage compartment. And again, that has to do with the fact that this is not a ground-up EV. BMW had to pack electric components here in replacement of an internal combustion engine because, well, this thing has to serve 2 different powertrains. But anyways, let's talk about the performance here. So if you choose the entry-level eDrive 40, you'll get 335 horsepower and 317 pound-feet of torque. And all of that power is sent through one motor in the back, so it's a rear-wheel drive setup. 0 to 60 is about 5.5 seconds, so it's pretty healthy for an entry-level trim, and range is the highest of all of the i4s. It's 318 miles. Now, if you step up to the xDrive 40, which simply adds a second motor in the front to give you that all-wheel drive capability, well, then your horsepower figures bump up to 396, and you get 443 pound-feet of torque for a 0 to 60 of about 4.9 seconds, which is also incredibly healthy figures. Now, jumping up to this bad boy, this one has 536 horsepower and 586 pound-feet of torque. That is more horsepower and torque than the Model 3 Performance. Now, 0 to 60 for this one, according to BMW, is 3.7 seconds. However, that's a bit conservative because I've seen reports out there of this thing doing 0 to 60 just about 3.5 seconds. Now, range, of course, is the lowest of all the trim levels because it takes a lot of electrons to power all 4 wheels with that much horsepower. You're looking at a range of 267 miles on the 19-inch wheels. However, if you choose these upgraded 20-inch wheels, your range goes down to 227 miles. Now, in terms of charging here, your charge port is the same place where you have your gas cap. So you have the regular J1772 plug. This just plugs into your regular 240 outlet at home. And then you have CCS here combined. So if you do DC fast charging, you simply plug it in there. Now let's talk about what's going on here. This is an 84.3 kilowatt hour battery, so it's not massive. It's very comparable to the Tesla Model 3 Performance. And in terms of charging at home on the 240 volt, you can get upwards of 11 kilowatts with the onboard charger in this vehicle. Now, if you take this to a DC fast charger, you can get a peak charging rate of 205 kilowatt hours of energy, which is pretty healthy numbers. BMW says 10 to 80% will take about 30 minutes, and you can get about 100 miles of range in just 10 minutes of high-speed charging. Now, obviously, that is dependent on the chargers that you're parked at. Now, if I was speccing an M50, personally, I'd choose the smaller wheel and tire combo just so I can get that extra 40 miles of range. That's pretty significant numbers, and it's really not going to make a major difference in terms of performance. Now, in case you're wondering about the compatibility with Tesla supercharger networks, BMW says it will open up to the supercharger network as of 2025. Now, in regards to when that plug is going to be changed to the NACS adapter, I don't have any specific details on that. However, I'm sure within the next few years that CCS plug is going to be replaced with the North American charging standard to make it a little bit more compatible with Tesla's supercharger network. Next up, let's jump on the interior of the BMW and show you some of the features and specs. Now, starting off, I want to show you the BMW key. You got your lock button over here with the logo, unlock, trunk release, and your panic button. And I do like that BMW M coloration on the side. The key is pretty light and it's pretty thin, so it fits in your pocket nicely. Now, jumping inside of this BMW, no surprise, the interior looks identical to the gas-powered version of the 4 Series. Now, starting off with the door panel, of course, as you would expect, soft touch use of materials all throughout. This is kind of like this fake leather wrapped surface. It's kind of a rubberized material. It's soft touch, so you can rest your elbow here. You do have natural aluminum over here, along with your lock-unlock switches and your aluminum door handle. Now, my particular vehicle comes with this Mocha Vernasco leather interior. It's about a $1,500 option, but I do like that color. That brown color looks really nice on the interior. And then you've got your speaker grille over here, along with your memory seats. Now, my particular vehicle comes with the upgraded 16-speaker Harman Kardon audio system, which is part of the premium package, which is a $1,650 option. The standard i4 comes with a 10-speaker audio system. And I gotta say, the speaker grills don't look that nice, but the audio system is great. It's fantastic. I think Harman Kardon makes some of the best interior audio systems. Now, you get soft touch material over here. Even this is kind of a leather wrapped surface, even though it is a harder touch material. You got a storage compartment in there with a cup holder and your trunk release. Now, jumping on the inside, let's talk about these seats because they look really nice and they're incredibly adjustable. So first off, not only can you adjust this headrest to move forward and back along with up and down, but you can also adjust the side bolsters, or how thick these side bolsters are, using the buttons located over here. You can also, of course, adjust the thigh support, which is typical BMW fashion, and then you've got 4-way lumbar support and, of course, power operated seats. Now, heated seats are standard on every single i4. Ventilated seats are optional. There's no ventilated seats on this particular vehicle I'm testing today. Now, it would have been nice if they had a little bit more contrast stitching here. It is a little bit lighter, but it's not like a red color to designate that this is the M50 package. Now, jumping inside this vehicle, let's talk about the interior. First off, starting off with the steering wheel, this is, of course, leather wrapped. You do have that contrast stitching I want, which is the red and the blue, the typical M coloration. You've also got M badging down here. Surprisingly, it's not a flat bottom design, which would have been appreciated because there's not that much space in this vehicle. Now, heated steering wheel is included on this one, but it's an optional feature. It does not come standard, unfortunately. Now, on the left-hand side of the steering wheel, you'll find your buttons for your cruise control. This does have adaptive cruise control and lane centering technology, and in prior BMWs I've reviewed, they do have lane changing capability as well. However, that is not a standard feature. You do have to pay for adaptive cruise control, which is surprising because a lot of entry-level vehicles come with adaptive cruise control out of the gate. Now, I do want to point out that these little sections above the buttons are actually lights. So when you're driving and you're not paying attention to the road, or your hands are off the steering wheel when they're supposed to be on the steering wheel, this thing will light up and let you know that, hey, you should pay attention. And of course, over time, if you continue to keep your hands off the steering wheel, the lane centering technology will shut off. Over here, you have a leather wrapped center for your airbag. And then on the right-hand side are the buttons to control your volume, your voice activation, your phone, and then your buttons to control your instrument gauge cluster display. So what we have over here in the center, turning this vehicle on, it is a 12.3-inch all-digital display, and it's pretty customizable. So by pushing the button over here on the steering wheel, I can open up menu where I can select what content is shown over here in the middle, from your navigation to your typical trip odometer settings to music, etc. But you could also change the layout. So I can make it look a little bit different, make it more minimalist, however I want. So it is customizable, although there's not too many different options here. And then lastly, this particular vehicle, since it has the premium package, which includes the speakers and the heated steering wheel, it also includes a head-up display. So you can regulate that by using the buttons on the steering wheel. And as you can see here, I can change it to show different types of head-up displays. So it can look more minimalistic. I could see the navigation. It can show me kind of a sportier mode. So it's kind of hard to see on camera, but there is some customization here that you can regulate using the buttons on the steering wheel. Aside from that, on the left-hand side, you'll see your battery percentage, and then on the right-hand side is your range. Now, before we dive into the center screen, I want to talk about the use of materials all throughout the dashboard. So this is all that same soft touch material that you found on the door panel. Of course, no cheap hard touch plastics here. Everything is nice and either real or faux leather wrapped. You've also got some stitching over there on the dashboard. And then my particular vehicle comes with the $400 Shadow interior package, which adds carbon fiber trim. So all of this is now carbon fiber, along with your center arm console. Everything is wrapped in premium carbon fiber, and it looks really nice. It's probably worth the $400 option. Now, behind the steering wheel on the left-hand side is your turn signal stalk, which you're probably not going to use if you own a BMW, and then you have your automatic headlamp controls, and then on the right-hand side are your windshield wiper stock. Now to the left of the steering wheel are your buttons for your headlight controls, and then as you'll notice, there is ambient lighting inside of the i4. It's all across the door panel and on the center dash, along with underneath this little trim piece on the passenger side, and that is adjustable using the infotainment screen. All right, now jumping over to the center screen, it is a 14.9-inch 4K curved display. So this is kind of like one giant piece, and it curves around on the dash, and it runs BMW's latest UI, which is pretty good to use. You have your home menu here where you have your full screen navigation. You do have a quick access button for your fan controls because there's no physical buttons to do that. A little bit unfortunate. Quick access buttons for your audio, your navigation, your wireless Apple CarPlay, and wireless Android Auto. Then you kind of have this apps menu where you can cycle through a variety of different applications for this vehicle. There's also some AI built into this car, so it can figure out some of your habits. So if you roll down your windows every time you're in a certain area or, in certain neighborhoods, then this vehicle will learn that habit and automatically roll down your windows. So it does have some pretty cool artificial intelligence there. You can also ask the BMW voice assistant to do certain functions for you, like adjust the air temperature, roll down the windows, etc. A couple other things to point out here. This is where you can adjust your interior ambient lighting. And as I was saying, there are some options here. Not as many as some Mercedes products, but pretty much every single color you could ask for. You also have a charging menu over here where you can obviously set your charging limit and then your schedule depending on, if you charge during certain times of day. And then another neat feature here under driver settings is BMW iconic sounds. So this is where BMW partnered with music and movie composer Hans Zimmer to create a soundtrack specific for BMW. And we'll show this off when we get behind the wheel, but it essentially pumps in a electronic type of sound on the interior, especially when you're accelerating, to make it feel a little bit more exhilarating. This is one of the first electric vehicles to have this. I know the Ioniq 5N now has a very similar feature, a little bit more advanced, but this just makes the personality of the vehicle a little bit more fun to drive. Now, another thing to point out here is mine comes with the parking assistance package. So by pushing this button over here, it can obviously search for a parking spot and park the vehicle itself. But my car also comes with the 360-degree camera. You can even do a 3D view where you can see what's going on around the car. Oddly enough, you can't actually swirl it. You have to click on different sections of the car. I don't think this is a very usable feature or useful feature. It's more of a cool marketing gimmick, and it's something to show off to your friends, but I think the bird's eye view is a little bit more important and easier to understand where things are around you. One last thing to point out over here is in regards to your regenerative braking. So it is adjustable if you go into your driving settings, and then depending on this energy recovery in drive mode, you can do adaptive, high, medium, or low. And as you adjust, you'll notice the level of regen over here on the screen, so that way you know what mode it's in. Now, moving down from the center display, you got your air vent controls and then physical buttons simply for your volume, your seat track, and your defrost. Now, I do like how this section over here is wrapped in that same soft touch fake leather material that's on the dashboard. Over here, though, you do have some hard touch plastics. Now, opening up this little compartment, this is where you're going to find your wireless charging pad, and it works similar to other charging pads. It's just okay. Mine is the largest phone on the market. It's an S22 Ultra, and it fits just fine in here. Now, moving behind that, you've got two cup holders, a USB port, and a cigarette-style power outlet. I should mention there is some ambient lighting in here as well that's adjustable. Now, closing this up and moving further back, these are your quick access buttons for your traction control, your parking assist. This is your start-stop button, which is outlined in blue because this is an electric car, and that's BMW's color for electric vehicles. You also got different drive modes over here. There's actually more than what's shown in these buttons. So if you click Sport mode, there's actually Sport, Sport Boost, and Sport Individual. And as you can see, it actually changes the gauge cluster display as well. There's also a Comfort mode, and then you've got Eco Pro or Eco Pro Individual. So depending on, if you want to be efficient, you can click those buttons. You got your auto hold, your electronic parking brake, and then this is your gear selector. It's a little bit odd. I believe the previous i4 I reviewed had a traditional one, but this one is kind of like this little switch that, you pull into drive. Now, if you put it into the B mode, that is where it's not going to coast. So you will put it in B mode, and this thing will come to a complete stop if you take your foot off of the accelerator. Whereas in drive mode, it will still coast a little bit, kind of more similar to an internal combustion engine. Now, over here are your quick access buttons for some of the stuff I showed off in the screen. And then this is similar to other BMW BMW products from like the 2010s or so. This is actually a mouse where you can control everything going on the screen. So I'd like that they've added this redundancy, because sometimes you don't want to, you know, distract yourself with what's going on here. You can kind of use muscle memory and then simply just for a second take your eyes off the road to see where the cursor is at. I have a feeling very few people use this, but I'm glad that BMW's included it. Moving further back, you got some more brown leather that's really soft touch, and then opening this compartment up, it's pretty small, but you do have a USB-C port in there. Now over to the passenger side, you've got a glove compartment that's lined in felt, and then moving up above you, you don't have any digital rear view camera mirror, which would be nice because there's really not that much visibility out of the second row with that headrest in the middle. Then moving further up, you've got LED lighting up here, and then my vehicle also has this sunroof. Now, it's not a first and second row moonroof, but it is a pretty large sunroof overall. So it does kind of creep into the second row, but it's not a full roof type of scenario like you find in the Model 3. Now, jumping into the second row of the i4, just as nice as the first row, soft touch materials up here, more aluminum with your speaker grills, and then you have your automatic window switches with a little storage compartment down here. And then this is also still wrapped in that nice leather-ish material. Now, jumping onto the seats, just as nice as the first row, they're still wrapped in that brown leather, although you do have a really small headrest over here, which I find a little bit funny. Now, jumping behind myself, one thing to point out is because this is a sloping roof line, you kind of have to duck your head so you don't hit it on the roof. Sitting in the back seat, there's pretty decent amount of legroom back here. It's about 34.2 inches of space behind the first row. This is how I would sit behind myself. One thing to point out though is my knees are a little bit elevated. I feel like it's a little bit closer to my chest, and they do that so you have a little bit better legroom, but it does make it for a little bit of a less comfortable position. Also in the center, you've got this large center hump, which is unlike most electric vehicles that are built from the ground up to be EVs. You don't have a center hump because, well, you don't have a transmission tunnel. But since this platform is also used for the internal combustion version, of course, you have a little bit of compromised legroom in the middle. Now, I do like that they have rear air vents back here. You also have your own set of climate control settings back here and 2 USB ports. Now, my particular vehicle does not come with heated seats in the second row. However, that is an optional feature that you can get on the i4. Over here, you got a little center arm console with 2 cup holders. Now, up above me, I have about 1 inch of space. I'm about 5'9", so it could be a little bit tight if you're over 6 feet. And overall, sitting in the second row, you feel like you're a little bit more in like a coupe or a sports car. It feels a little bit more claustrophobic, to be honest. So you may not be comfortable in the second row. For me, it's perfectly fine, but it does feel a little bit sportier than your typical sedan. Now, jumping into the power-operated trunk of the BMW. One advantage to this is it is a hatchback-like style, so you do have a little bit more room in the back, or at least you could fit taller objects back here. Now, in terms of cargo capacity, it's not great. You're looking about 10 cubic feet of space behind the second row. If you fold down that second row, which is pretty easy to do, and you can fold them down individually because each one has its own section, then you can get upwards of 45.6 cubic feet of space behind the first row. But there's no mistaking it. This is a pretty small vehicle. It's a compact sedan. Now, underneath the trunk floor, you have your subwoofer and a pretty small compartment, but at least you do have some hidden storage, and then some more storage over here on the left and the right hand side. This is also your charging cable, which you can hook into the vehicle using this little strap over here. Now let's talk about pricing. As of 2025, the eDrive 40 with the rear wheel drive setup starts just around $58,000. If you step up to the xDrive version, that one's just around 62 grand, and then the M50 starts around $70,000. However, the vehicle standing behind me with that carbon fiber package, the upgraded wheels, the 360 camera, all the bells and whistles I've shown off today, this one tops out just around $88,000, and there's still additional options you can get. So it's definitely not an affordable car, but if I was purchasing one, I would try to stick to the lower option versions, somewhere near $70,000 if you can find it on dealership lots. Next up, let's talk about how it feels behind the wheel. But I do want to point out one interesting thing that I've noticed in this vehicle, and that is just how the door sounds when you're closing it. It just sounds like a tank. I mean, take a listen again. The fact is, this is a frameless window, but it still sounds so solid. I mean, it just sounds like a German car inside. It feels like it's just so solidly built. Now, reliability is definitely not BMW's strength, but build quality here is definitely ahead of the competition. Turning this vehicle on, take a listen again. If you caught it on camera, it kind of has this electronic virtual sound that gets piped in. That's part of the Hans Zimmer audio system or audio experience, the dynamic sounds that BMW talks about. So we'll show more of that off when we actually hit the freeway. But You can kind of hear it a little bit in the background. It's just being pumped into the cabin. Now, of course, you can shut that off in the settings as well if you don't like it, but I don't know why you would. I love the sound of the dynamic sounds. I wish my Rivian had that type of sound on the inside. Now, if you've sat in any 4 Series before, this is going to be a very familiar place because it's essentially identical. I will say it does feel like a pretty tight cabin. I haven't sat in a 4 Series in a very long time, and it takes getting used to. This is, I would argue, a compact sedan. So just be mindful of that. It does feel a little bit tight. Your door seal is pretty high up. It feels like you're sitting kind of low, despite the fact that I've raised this seat up pretty high. I still feel like I'm kind of in a sports car, for better or for worse. If you prefer that, that's great. But otherwise, it does take a little bit getting used to on the interior. It feels kind of tight. Now, in terms of the ride quality, I'm actually putting this into comfort mode. And you can, of course, adjust it. Even in sport mode, you can still have the comfort suspension. But in the comfort mode, the adaptive suspension is pretty soft. So here we're about to drive over some train tracks. And you may have not even noticed over camera. What surprised me is even though this has the M Sport suspension, it's a very compliant ride. It's very smooth, especially for a vehicle riding on low profile 20-inch wheels. It's perfectly fine. Driving over speed bumps, it's not painful whatsoever. I imagined it to have a similar suspension to like the M4, especially the M4 competition. You know, those are really, really rough. This rides like any other 4 Series, but it just happens to have the M-like performance under the hood, or I should say underneath the vehicle. Now, the regen mode that I put it in is high regen because I'm used to that, and it's pretty strong. You could easily do some one-pedal driving. Maybe the Rivian and the Tesla products are a little bit stronger, but it's up there. It's a pretty strong regen, and it's nice that you can adjust the various levels. All right, so we're about to enter the freeway, so I'm actually going to put this thing into sport boost mode. And I immediately felt the accelerator became a little bit more responsive. I'm also going to put my head towards the headrest because this thing is head-snappingly quick. So here we are, 20 miles per hour. I'm going to gun it. Woo-hoo-hoo! And I made it to 70. This thing is quick. That was also going uphill. It's so quick that you almost have torque steer in an all-wheel drive vehicle. It's crazy. Like the steering wheel will start shifting. And I don't know if you heard, but you had that Hans Zimmer soundtrack being piped in. This thing is so fun to drive. I don't care what anybody says. Electric vehicles aren't fun to drive. They're boring. This thing is fun. It doesn't matter. This thing is a fun car to drive. I have just as much fun in this as an internally combustion engine vehicle. It's super fun. Very torquey. That sound is really cool. Something I noticed about this car, so 0 to 63.7 seconds, you know, I compare it to my Rivian, which on paper does 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, but this thing feels quicker. It feels much torqueier. I think that has to do with the fact that this is a lighter vehicle. It's lower to the ground. This feels sportier, and even in day-to-day driving on city streets, the accelerator is very, very torquey. It doesn't take much effort to just have this thing kind of just rip and just pull you into the driver's seat. It's a really fun car to drive. I love it. Now, here we are on the freeway. This vehicle has frameless windows, of course, which isn't as sound insulated, but I gotta say, it's not loud inside the cabin. It's perfectly fine. It's probably a little bit quieter, I'd argue, than a Tesla Model 3, which isn't necessarily the standard here, but it's one of the closest competitors to this vehicle, and I'll actually be doing a comparison video between the two, so stay tuned for that on the channel. Hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date. But it's a pretty compliant ride. I could easily talk to people on the second row and be perfectly fine, but you do hear a little bit of noise coming through the top here, but it's perfectly normal. It's not annoying. And then because this is in the sport boost mode, I feel a little bit more of the road because the adaptive dampers have stiffened up. If I put it back into comfort, it's a little bit of a softer ride. You can just definitely tell it becomes a softer vehicle, but I think the 19-inch wheels are probably going to ride even better than these 20 inches. Now, in terms of the safety tech here, I wish this vehicle had adaptive cruise control standard. Luckily, my vehicle comes with it because it's very fully optioned, but turning this on, I'm going to set it to 70 miles per hour, and this vehicle will steer itself. Now, as I keep my hands off the steering wheel, I'll notice the lights on the steering wheel will start turning on, letting me know, hey, I should grab the steering wheel. The head-up display will also tell me, but it's a very good adaptive cruise control system with lane centering. For the most part, it's very little intervention. This thing will stay pretty centered in between the lanes. Now, oddly enough, on a prior BMW i4 I reviewed, I was able to change lanes by turning on the turn signal. Here, I haven't been able to do that, so I'm not quite sure if that's an additional option that my vehicle isn't configured with, but I know that BMW offers that because I experienced it in the prior BMW i4 I reviewed a couple years ago. Now, in terms of warranty here, because I'm sure reliability is a question, this may be the most reliable BMW you can buy. First off, you got a 4-year, 50,000 mile bumper-to-bumper limited warranty. Of course, an 8-year, 100,000 mile battery warranty for those of you that are concerned about battery replacement. And then you get 3 years of complimentary maintenance. Now, I'm not really sure what that entails because electric vehicles don't really require much, but you do get that included with every single purchase. Now, to finish off my impressions driving this vehicle, it's fun. As you saw with the smile plastered over my face as I was accelerating, this thing makes you want to just mash on the accelerator, and it does a really good job on that entertainment factor. And BMW did it right with those iconic sounds, because a lot of other manufacturers, including Hyundai, are now starting to do the same thing, but I believe BMW was the first to have some sort of enhanced audio with the electric components, because that adds to the emotion. It adds to the connection you have with the car because it uses more senses. And I love the dynamic sounds. I love that it's a Hans Zimmer audio system. I mean, it makes me feel like Batman behind the wheel. It's a cool concept, and there's no surprise why the i4 is always rated as one of the best electric vehicles you can buy, because it's got a lot of fun factor. It's not perfect. Its range isn't that great. Its storage capacity isn't that great. It's kind of a small vehicle, and there's no front trunk. But no car is perfect, and you're gonna have to have compromises. But it's truly a fantastic option if you're looking to buy one of the quickest electric sports sedans on the market today. So here we are off the freeway. We're just in city streets here and just gunning it. I mean, that was probably halfway down on the accelerator, and this thing just plants you into the seat. It's so torquey, so fun to drive. Anybody who has doubts about electrification and electric vehicles, sit behind the wheel of an i4. It's going to be incredibly fun, and it may just change your mind about electric vehicles. Now, to finish off this video, would I recommend you buy the BMW i4? Well, once again, I have fallen in love with the i4. I think it's one of the best electric vehicles on the market today. However, I think the one standing behind me that's pushing almost $90,000 takes it a little too far in terms of pricing. Like I mentioned earlier, I would stick to a lower optioned i4 M50 to try to keep it within $70,000 to $75,000, assuming the dealerships stock that vehicle. What I like about the i4 as compared to the competition is this feels like a German car through and through. I mean, even with just how the door sounds when you shut it, this is a BMW from the ground up. It just happens to have an electric powertrain. So if you love German cars, you're gonna love the i4. And this is one of the most thrilling electric vehicles to drive because of that Hans Zimmer soundtrack on the inside. They really nailed it out of the park with the i4. I just think pricing could be a little bit better. That being said, if you lease one of these, the lease rates are actually pretty competitive as compared to even the Tesla Model 3 Performance. So leasing would be my recommendation if you're looking to purchase one. But what are your thoughts on the BMW i4? Would you take this over the competition, and why? Let me know down in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly videos. That would help me out a lot. And check me out on all the social media at Schwazy_. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay Schwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.